welcome into Coach's Corner. It is going to be Monday. Recording this a week before, or a couple days before. But I am back with a new show for you. A very special show that I thought, I crafted this list a couple of weeks ago, and I think the discussion came up in one of my group chats about, how would you rank certain players? Where would you place them, like an all-time list and whatever? And I've never sat down and, done a cohesive list, one to, I guess, any number. When it comes to NBA legends, I thought about doing maybe a tier. I thought about doing this or that. But I just went ahead and wrote out a top 100 list of NBA players. Now, obviously, I can't say that I've watched every single player and that they passed the eye test for me. Because, I was not alive in the 90s. I was not even really coherent in the early 2000s. So, a lot of the stuff that I do know about these guys is just from history, from numbers that I've seen, from other people's stories that I've heard from, and whatnot. And so, because the NBA really is a very fluid league that essentially from the 80s on is when a lot of this history has really been made. Like, I have a couple of those guys sprinkled in from the time before there, but the NBA wasn't taken seriously until Magic and Bird. So, you had to kind of figure out where to place certain guys, and a lot of those older guys I do have on lower on this list probably than they might deserve, but it might be fair. Because there is such a change in competition that we've seen throughout the years for these players and for the NBA. It's just kind of how the league goes. It evolves, that whole deal. And so, without further ado, I introduce my NBA best players of all time list. It's on the screen now, obviously, for the YouTube watchers. For the pod listeners, it goes a little bit like this. I'm a Michael Jordan guy through and through. I've always appreciated Mike. I loved the Last Dance documentary, even though I know it was just MJ propaganda, for sure. Without a doubt, was MJ controlling the narrative, making him seem like the best player on earth, which he was, rightfully so. But control the narrative as much as he could and tell the story, I think, in a way that doesn't make him seem as bad of a guy as he might have been, but he still was, I think, fair to how competitive, how much he did push guys and whatnot, and how he struggled throughout his career. So I have Michael Jordan number one. 6 championships, no losses. Obviously, top 3 scoring all time, or top 4 now, I guess. If I'm trying to remember where Kobe is, I think. Either way, MJ's up there in the top of the scoring title. And it's even more incredible when you think about his career and the fact that he took off two years in his prime to go play baseball, an entirely different sport he went to go play. And just right in the middle of a three-peat. It's one of the more absurd stories, I think, that when you look back on is man, Michael Jordan, he really underwent all the trials and tribulations of those Larry Bird Celtics teams, those Isaiah Thomas Pistons team, and he finally got Scottie Pippen on his side, and a bunch of other guys, Horace Grant and whatnot, and they won a title. They won another title. They won 3 titles in a row, and then to just basically be fatigued from it and, bow out because at that point, he was talked about as the best player of all time. A three-peat that was unimaginable for anyone. And, at that time, I think people were really ready to crown Jordan the best of all time and already. And so when he takes off those 2 years, comes back late and, rattles off 3 more, it is an absurd real story that happened. So I have him 1, LeBron James at 2. It's one of those I've tried to keep LeBron James out of my top 3 for as long as I possibly can, but at this point now I have to concede him as the number 2 guy. I don't have him over Mike because of the finals record, because I think he's 4-7. It is very impressive to get there all those times. It is uber impressive to be there in the mix. 4 or 6 maybe. But there has to be some sort of, I don't want to say punishment, but some sort of setback from the fact that you were, um, what's its name? You're under 500 in finals appearances. Like, there has to be like some sort of like. I mean, we go back over them. The first one against San Antonio was tough because Duncan and those guys in 2007, right in their primes, he didn't really have anyone to work with on his team, on the Cavaliers. Doesn't make the finals again until he leaves to go to Miami. The first one he should have won. I mean, I feel like that should just be kind of expected. And I know, like, we talk about that Dirk playoff run is up there, upper echelon of performances we've seen in the playoffs. We'll see Dirk a little bit later on this list. But the fact that LeBron James wasn't able to beat Dirk, who at that time was pretty much like near the end of his prime, on a team that, like I said, had some good role players in Jason Terry, Tyson Chandler, Sean Murray, and like guys that were productive, but also were kind of past their prime. Jason Kidd, like I said, good players, really good players, but all of them were basically near the end of their prime, and LeBron James was not able to overcome, I don't know, their chemistry issues. I don't know what to really call them. And so I feel like I have to dock him for that. And then he beats the Baby Thunder, which is young Kevin Durant, young Russell Westbrook, young James Harden. I mean, that was a good win, but once again, they're all super young. Then he comes back and beats the Spurs, which that is an impressive win, but I feel like it does have to be mentioned. This was towards the end of the Spurs run as their prime. This was kind of like where Dirk was in his career when he won. This is where Duncan was in his career when he lost. And then he comes back the next time and wins it against LeBron, and there's another loss on his record. Because Kawhi Leonard, a young Kawhi Leonard that we had no real proof on as the player he is today, shuts down LeBron James, the best player in the world at that time. And then we get the Warriors runs. We get the Warriors beating them the first time. You know, it's a series that probably could have gone either way because, you know, the Warriors haven't been to the finals yet at that point. But they ended up winning because Andre Iguodala did a great job. And Curry didn't do fantastic throughout that, but he hit shots when he needed to. And then you have the 2016 3-1 comeback. And, of course, that has to be talked about as up there as one of the best. And I will mention, I don't know if it was the 2015 one, but LeBron did lead the finals, like, stats. Like, he led all of them as the leader. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it still wasn't enough to beat a young Warriors team. Then he has the 3-1 comeback, as I mentioned. That's an impressive one. But it also has to be mentioned that Kyrie Irving was at his absolute peak in that series, and I don't think he's ever reached that level again. And Draymond was suspended for that game. And I also forgot to mention the Spurs win that they had, all thanks to Ray Allen hitting that big three-pointer. If Ray Allen doesn't hit that big three-pointer in the corner, obviously they lose that series, but and the rebound by Bosh, but you know, regardless, they won that series in Game 7, obviously, so can't fault him that much. And then he loses to the Kevin Durant Warriors. Kevin Durant Warriors, is it 3 times in a row? No, just 2. And then you have the Bubble Championship, which that's a whole nother discussion for how do you count the bubble. That the bubble is such an anomaly of an NBA quote-unquote season. I don't know. And I mean, he this is just straight up my LeBron hate session, but like he forced everyone to be in the bubble because no one was going to say, LeBron, no, we're not going to compete in this bubble nonsense. We're not going to be locked away in Disney World playing games so you can win your title in the 1 year on the Lakers that you've been a top seed. So, like, no one's going to say, LeBron, we can't do this. But, because, I mean, if he says it's going to go, he's the king of the NBA at that point. At this point, still, like, you're going to do what LeBron says. So, kind of a tough scene there for players in the bubble that probably didn't want to be there, but LeBron wanted to because I think he knew that this might be the only shot that we have to be the bona fide number 1 favorite to win this title, and they did. So hats off. And then since then hasn't really done a whole lot, but he gets those stats, and of course he became the all-time leading scorer this year. So it's harder. It's hard to like form the argument when like using all those bad things that I tried to list. There's still all the well, he did end up leading the finals and all those stats. He does have multiple MVPs. Probably should have more. His all-time league scorer is up there on the passing assist list, of the rebounds list. Like he's played 20 years at 38 in a sport that players don't do that really ever. Kind of like Tom Brady. So like the argument is so difficult for me to take him out of the top two, and I do have him too. So there's the LeBron session. Then I have Kareem at 3. Obviously, if you look at his Wikipedia, there's ages, like so many long list of achievements that he's had, all the multi-time MVPs, championships, this, that, and the other. Kareem, feel like is an easy 3 for the best center. Then number 4 is, I think, where it gets tough. Number 4 through number 9, I think, is where it's really like tough. I'd say probably 4 through 8 is more closer than 8 and 9. But regardless, Tim Duncan, I mean, he was the franchise for the Spurs, obviously got there, and they rattled off 5 championships over the course of 20 years. So much winning. Obviously not your flashy player. He's won a couple MVPs despite that. And I think he deserves to be 4 just because, he came in like in the middle of Shaq's prime, and I won't say he handled Shaq, but he did his, he kind of like took that torch as I'm the best big man in the league from Shaq. I might not be the most dominant, but I'm the most complete, the most, basketball savvy mind in the game at this point. So Tim Duncan, my number 4. Number 5, Shaq. The most dominant player of his time, could be the most dominant player of all time, I think, because of how much of a big monster force athletic he was early in his career, and the power came when he was on the Lakers. And I mean, if Shaq has the Kobe work ethic, I think he's easily one of these 1-2 guys. But he likes being a businessman. He likes working on music, and he likes working in movies and with the General Insurance commercials. He likes doing all this stuff. So I think that took away from his basketball focus, really. And like I said, because he could average 30 and 20 in his sleep. So I mean, if you do that, why do you need to train at it so much? So Shaq at number 5. Hakeem at number 6. The argument could be made to flip those two because of how Hakeem kind of owned O'Neal. Like when Hakeem won his 2 championships back-to-back while Jordan was gone, he won one of them over O'Neal. So could make the argument for Hakeem over Shaq. I mean, Hakeem, I think he might be the block leader still of all time. So, like, obviously his defensive prowess, he's probably the best defensive center of all time. It's just, the offense, he had the dream shake, in the post. So Hakeem, I think, is a rightful number 6 here. Number 7, I have Larry Bird. Obviously, I mentioned Bird earlier with the turn of the NBA in the 80s. Really, just to point out, I have Bird over Magic here simply because I think Bird was a more impressive player for his shooting, and on top of like everything else that he does. Because I think Magic and Bird are similar skill sets, except one can shoot and one can't really shoot. Like Bird probably can't pass as well as Magic, but I think Bird does everything else just better. And I think he underwent harder times in the Eastern Conference with the Isaiah Thomas Pistons I mentioned earlier. With Dominique Wilkins gave him a lot of problems with scoring and stuff. And Larry Bird was an elite guy, and I think he deserves to be obviously top 10 here. So number 7. And number 8, I have one of my personal favorites, Kobe Bryant. Rest in peace, Kobe Bryant. Obviously, I think is maybe not the best Laker of all time when it comes to it, but I think he is the most beloved by Laker fans because of how he stayed with the franchise, despite all the rumors and trade rumors and thought he was going to Chicago and all that. He ended up staying in LA for his entire career. Obviously was a master at scoring. He was the second coming of Michael Jordan. won 5 championships, 3 with Shaq, as the best duo of all time with Kobe and Shaq, and then 2 on his own with Pau Gasol. But still, Kobe was that guy, and he rightfully so deserves to be here at 8. And I don't think he's the most efficient, obviously, but I think he deserves to be on this list. The number 9, you have Steph Curry. Changed the game with the 3-point shot, obviously. I don't think the sport will ever be the same because of what he's done from 3-point range. It's unfathomable. The shots that he takes, the ball handling he has, playmaking, gets teammates involved. And like I said, his stature kind of limits him on defense, obviously, but he's no slouch there either. So, Steph Curry is number 9. He's my best point guard of all time, just because of how I think he, it's not that he doesn't have a gravity around him. I think he is the solar system. He is the solar system when he's on the court. I think he controls everything. He dictates everything when he's on offense because of how lethal he is as a shooter. And like I said, it might disappear more on the defensive side, as a one-on-one defender. But if Steph Curry gets the rebound, what happens? You have 3 players that are looking right at him because they're worried and scared that he's going to run up and shoot a 3 in transition, or he's going to find the open teammate cutting, and Andrew Wiggins maybe. That's just the gravity that he holds is just paramount to the Warriors' success over all these years and the dynasty that we watched in the 2010s, to cap it off with that title against the Celtics on his own as the Finals MVP. I think that was the title to shut everyone up. I don't think there was any more discussion. Vince Carter, it's over when it comes to debating Steph Curry as a player that doesn't perform under the brightest lights. So Steph Curry, I have him at 9 over Magic Johnson. And I mentioned Magic Johnson, I was talking about Larry Bird. Obviously, uber exciting passer, good defender, a great finisher. It's just I knock points off of Magic because of the shooting, but also because he was a 6'8" point guard. And yes, that's impressive, but I mean, as a 6'8" point guard in the 80s, how are you not as dominant as Magic Johnson was? I mean, imagine Ben Simmons in the 80s. I imagine it's not far off from what Magic Johnson was, and that might be a little disrespectful, but I mean, seriously, he's a 6'8", 6'10" point guard playing over a lot of guys that at that time, they didn't really switch guys like that. They didn't, it was just unfathomable, and I just have him at 10 because, like I said, still a great player, but up there, but I don't know. Then moving on, we have 11, Bill Russell. Obviously, that older era I was talking about, it's hard to rank him and Wilt Chamberlain and Oscar Robinson. But I have them here in 3 in a row here just because I think, obviously Bill Russell won all those championships. I think he'd be, Draymond Green level, but probably better in today's game. It's just he was in an era that was kind of so hard to judge. But number 11, I feel like is fair to Mr. Russell. Rest in peace to him as well. And Wilt Chamberlain as well. Wilt Chamberlain's the guy who puts up all the stats that you are like, how is this man even a real human being? He has all the funny records where it's like, first player to score 45, 10, and 20 since Wilt Chamberlain. Whoa, he has all those hilarious stats. So number 12 here. Number 13, Mr. Triple-Double, Oscar Robinson. Obviously that averaging a triple-double thing wasn't a thing in the NBA since Oscar Robinson. Obviously, more players have done that nowadays, but for that time, still insane. Still one of the better guards of all time. I think Big O deserves to be here. Then 14, I have Kevin Durant, it's a tough argument to make for Kevin Durant because he won the rings with a team that was obviously loaded and dynasty worthy. Kevin Durant truly is one of the best scorers that we've ever seen at all 3 levels. He's, can make it from 3, can make it from mid-range over anyone, can dunk, plays defense. I think his defense is underrated. And so Kevin Durant at 14, I feel like is a fair spot for him just because, He doesn't get the credit of like winning those and being the leader on a lot of these championship teams, but he did win two. He won two Finals MVPs with those, so 14 for him. Charles Barkley at 15 is controversial, I'll say the least. But I think the context of Charles Barkley matters a lot because he was a 6'6", 6'5" power forward. He's like the opposite of Magic Johnson, where he's super undersized for his spot. Was a big old, round mound to rebound was not his name just because, he liked to rebound, is because he was round too. But regardless, I think Chuck was, one of the best players of the 80s, early 90s. He was on that dream team. Many people were very adamant that he was the second best player on that team to Jordan because Bird was having his back issues and Magic had just had AIDS. So, Charles Barkley was kind of the de facto second best player on that team of legends. So, won an MVP, took his team to the finals. I won't say alone, but took his team to the finals against Michael. And so, I feel like Charles Barkley deserves more credit. It's just he didn't get that ring, And that's tough for Chuck, but yeah, a lot of these guys behind him, some of these guys I think are right on the cusp of passing him. Like I said, I think these all could be made an argument. 16 and 17 in particular, Giannis Antetokounmpo's resume as he has right now is absurd. It really is all NBA teams, all NBA defensive teams, 2 MVPs, Finals MVP, champion, 50 points in the closeout game. What is there not to list about Giannis? He's super impressive, still young. I think he'll rise on this list, but right now I think 16 is a fair spot where it gives him room to grow, but it's still his accomplishments still are monumental over a lot of these guys below him. Then I have Dirk, and Dirk is a power forward that I do think could be, could be the guy that is over Charles Barkley as well because he has that championship. And like I said, one of the best playoff runs of all time against the Heat there. Scorer from all 3 levels, post guy, obviously. Kind of evolutionized the game for the big man shooting. So Dirk, a lot of those 3, big 3 power forwards, they can thank Dirk for that. David Robinson put up absurd numbers. Obviously didn't do a lot of winning until Tim Duncan got to town, but he got those championships with him. Jerry West, the perennial loser, kind of always kept losing, couldn't help himself in the finals, but Jerry West was still a guard during his time that I think deserves credit. Isaiah Thomas, Julius Erving, Dr. J. Obviously the ABA numbers, I don't know how they count into this, but he was the best player in the ABA and came over to the NBA, won a championship with the Sixers. A lot of people from the 80s basically give Julius Erving the flowers that he deserves, I think, because it's always man, who's the guy that you love to watch? Who's the most difficult guy you dealt with? And Dr. J is normally the answer. Isaiah Thomas, 21, led those Pistons teams. I think at this point he kind of gets overhated, just because I think now in his post-basketball career he hasn't been a super clean guy, but on top of that, people don't like him because of Mike and the Bad Boys and all that stuff, but 21 feels fair for him. Moses Malone, I think, is a fairly underappreciated career. He bounced around a lot, but won 2 MVPs, won a championship with that Sixers team in '83. Just, I think one of the better centers of all time that doesn't get talked about as much. Kevin Garnett, I think Kevin Garnett's maybe next to Tim Duncan, one of the best two-way guys, two-way power forwards in the league's history. Fantastic in defense. Obviously his offense I think slowed down once he got to the twilight of his career, but still when he was on the Wolves he was a threat. He won MVP and won that championship with the Celtics. So number 24 is redacted. That's Karl Malone. Not a big Karl Malone guy. If you want more questions on Karl Malone, look up Karl Malone 13 years old and I'll let you guys read that. But 24. Then moving on, I have Dwayne Wade at 25. I think he's maybe the 3rd best shooting guard of all time. He has the rings to prove it. Has one of those championship runs in 2006 on his own with an older Shaq to beat Dirk. And, he didn't play as long as he probably could have with those knee injuries in the later years with the Heat and then the Bulls. But Dwayne Wade, I think, does deserve the flowers as one of those guys that was super fun to watch in his prime. Elgin Baylor, kind of similar to Jerry West, lost a lot of games as an older guy, but still was the dude. 27, John Stockton. It seems disrespectful to John Stockton because you look at his name on lists with like the all-time leader in assists and all-time leader in steals. They're just so monumentally larger than everyone else. But in the long run, I think that John Stockton benefited from having a redacted on his team to throw the ball to for the assist. I think he was definitely a big part of his Jazz team going to 2 finals, but never won the ring. And it's just I can't in good faith put him over Dwayne Wade when I think Dwayne Wade would dust John Stockton. I mean, respectfully to John Stockton, I love him, but then I have Bob Cousy at 28, Celtics legend. John Havlicek's the same way here at 32. 29, Scottie Pippen, one of those guys. Defense, offense, playmaking, 3-point shooting. He had it all. It's just he played second fiddle to Michael Jordan, so obviously he probably didn't get the love he deserved. And when he was on his own, he had playoff success one year, and I don't know if they did much the other year. So as a Batman, I don't know, but as a Robin, obviously might be the best Robin of all time. Then I have Nikola Jokic at 30, pending this finals game. Obviously, this is coming out later, but Jokic right now, if he wins the finals MVP, like I think he will because he just had a 30, 20, and 10 game in Game 3 here. Nikola Jokic is like the easiest, like highest riser on this list, I think, out of anyone. Like I don't know if there's another player on this list that will rise up the ranks as quickly as Jokic will if he wins this title. Because if he wins the title, gets finals MVP, I think he shifts right into this like 17 to 14 range. I think that's like exactly where he slides up. But right now I have him 30 just because back-to-back MVP, putting up stat lines that we've never seen from a center, the best passing center I think ever. I don't think that's a debate really. And can just hurt you in a multitude of ways while also being efficient with it. Makes all his teammates better with his passing. Can shoot the three with good touch. Around the rim, he can destroy you in the post. Not like, back you down and dunk on you, but back you down and shoot a ridiculously hard floater over you. So having him at 30 feels fair right now with a finals win on the horizon potentially. So you have that. And I just noticed something. I have 2 Reggie Millers on here. We'll take out a Reggie Miller here, so just so that way I can edit this. But moving on, I'm just going to run through a lot of these names real quick. Patrick Ewing, 31. John Havlicek, 32. Reggie Miller, 33. Kevin McHale, 34. 35. Allen Iverson, 36. James Harden. James Harden, I think, is another guy that has a case to move up if he ever ends up getting a finals win, I guess, here in his last couple of years in his prime. Or not his prime, but the last couple of years of his career here, because he has the MVP. He led a team to the Western Conference Finals. It's just in the playoffs he just can't. He can't rely on those foul shots like he normally does, and it just hurts him every time. Dominique Wilkins, 37. Walt Frazier, 38. Gary Payton, 39. Clyde Drexler, 40. Chris Paul, 41. Chris Paul is another one of those guys in the playoffs. He can't seem to get it done, but when you look at him on the all-time assist list, that's a tough word. And the steals list, it's hard to not include him. Pete Maravich, 42. Steve Nash, 43. Russell Westbrook, 44. James Worthy, 45. Kawhi Leonard, 46. This is where it gets more into guys that, they weren't necessarily the dominant guys throughout their entire time in the league. Obviously, they were the best of the best at their time, but Kawhi Leonard at 46 here. Kawhi Leonard has not been healthy for the past couple of years since his 2019 his legendary, finals run with the Raptors. But he has 2 championships. He has 2 finals MVPs for both of those championships. And when he plays, like I said, they win games. The Spurs did, the Clippers did, the Raptors did. All those teams won games when Kawhi Leonard was healthy. Yao Ming at 47, Anthony Davis at 48, Jason Kidd at 49, Bob McAdoo at 50. And then if you just want to look through on the YouTube and look at this, like some notable names, Carmelo I have at 55, Wes Unseld at 58, Dwight Howard at 59, Pau Gasol at 67, Chris Mullin at 72, Dikembe Mutombo at 75, Klay Thompson at 78, Bill Walton at 79. Some of these names were hard to come up with. Manu Ginobili at 90. A lot of these guys were hard to come up with here towards the end of the list because, there are so many legendary players, and it's hard to distinguish some of these guys from others because they were so different. Like Dave Cowens played for the Celtics in like the 60s. Cowens is an old Celtics player, and then you have Ray Allen, who at his time was the best 3-point shooter ever, and Cowens probably never even saw the 3-point line. So that's where it's like hard to list a lot of these guys who aren't clear-cut legends that I have like here at the top. So, but if you want to watch the YouTube, check out some of those names I scrolled through in the late 60s, 50s, 80s, 70s, 90s. I went out of order there, didn't I? But yeah, if you want to like check all that stuff out, then feel free. But for that'll do it for me. I'll be back with another show on Wednesday. Obviously, like I said, pre-recorded, but then still, nonetheless, I think good shows. And as always, make sure to like, share, subscribe, check out the website, lksportstalk.com. And until next time, goodbye.